The sky burned red that day, not with fire, but with the sickly glow of 1,000 fractured suns filtered through ash and smoke. Clouds moved unnaturally fast, torn and shredded by winds that howled across ruined plains. Every sound was sharp, metallic, like knives scraping against the bones of a dying world. The smell lingered in the air. Charred flesh, ozone, and blood baked into dust. We had thought we had seen everything the galaxy could offer us. The endless wars of the Imperium, the madness of the warp, the whispering promises of chaos. We thought nothing new could come to damn us further. But we were wrong. We didn't know his name at first. Only that something had arrived. He didn't come with ships or armies. No banners, no proclamations, no sermons. He came alone. A single figure falling from the void, like a shard of night piercing through atmosphere. Some said they saw a star rip itself open when he entered the system, burning like a wound in reality itself. And then silence, until the screaming began. He walked through fire and rubble as though it were mist. Bolter shells cracked against him like raindrops. Lost fire seared his skin but left no mark. Chain's words broke on his flesh with the whine of useless teeth. He moved faster than thought, stronger than reason, and his gaze was colder than the void. At first, the soldiers of the Astra Militarum believed him a saint, sent by the God Emperor himself. A figure wrapped in a crimson cape, descending from the heavens, unstoppable against their enemies. For a brief, terrible moment, hope rose where none should exist. But hope is always a lie, because when the cheering began, he silenced it with a single gesture. A wave of his hand, and an entire platoon was scattered like dust in a hurricane. Banners, bodies, faith, all torn apart as if the universe itself had decided to mock their devotion. The truth struck us slowly, like a knife drawn across the throat rather than a bullet to the skull. He was no angel, no saint, no servant of the Emperor. He was something else. A power unbound by the rules of our world, unchained by the laws of flesh or faith. The Imperium has many names for monsters: mutant, heretic, Xenos, demon. None of them fit him. His eyes glowed with the red of twin suns drowning in blood, and when he spoke, his voice was not the honeyed whisper of chaos nor the mechanical bark of a space marine. It was deeper, colder, something that resonated in bone and marrow. He said only one sentence that first day: "This world belongs to me now." And with that, our nightmare began. We thought the galaxy already cruel beyond measure. We thought the horrors of the warp were the worst fate awaiting us. But his arrival was proof of a darker truth. There are monsters even chaos fears, and he was one of them. But that was only the beginning. They say he fell from the void like a meteor. Others whisper he was spat out by the warp itself, a punishment even the gods of chaos wanted no part of. I was there when the first story took root, huddled in a hab block that stank of rot and burnt plasteel, listening to men too afraid to close their eyes. They argued in half-whispers. Some swore he was a weapon of the Mechanicus, a hidden project lost since the dark age of technology. Others believed he was the Emperor reborn, testing the faith of his children with trials of blood and fear. And then there were those who thought he was a demon prince wearing human skin, sent to mock us with a parody of salvation. The truth? We never knew. Perhaps we never will. All we had were scraps of rumor, fragments of testimony, and the corpses he left behind. The first settlement he destroyed was Cryovast Hive. No one survived to tell us what happened. Only scattered pict feeds recovered from melted archives. The footage flickered with static, distorted by radiation and screams. You could make out only shapes. A single figure walking through avenues of stone, buildings collapsing in his wake, hab blocks splitting open like carcasses. One frame showed children fleeing down a stairwell, their faces twisted in terror, and then red eyes burning behind them, cutting the image to black. The Administratum tried to bury it, of course. They always do. Unreliable data, warp corruption. But word spreads faster than parchment. Refugees spoke of him with trembling lips. Some called him the Red Sun, others the False Angel. A few dared whisper a word that would haunt every soldier since Superman. Not savior, not protector, just a sound, alien to our ears yet heavy with dread. We learned quickly that he was not bound by hunger, exhaustion, or mercy. He never tired. He never slowed. Entire battalions thrown against him fell within minutes. Basilisks fired point-blank. He caught their shells mid-air and hurled them back into the earth like toys. Lehman Russ tanks burned as he tore through armor with his bare hands, their machine spirits shrieking in pain before silence consumed them. But it wasn't only the destruction that broke us. It was the way he looked at us. Cold, detached, as though we were insects buzzing too loudly near his ear. He didn't revel in carnage like the servants of Khorne. He didn't whisper promises like Slaanesh. He simply acted without hesitation or care, as if our existence itself was a nuisance to be erased. In that, he was worse than chaos, because he wasn't corrupted. He wasn't tempted. He wasn't suffering madness. He was choosing, and choice is the cruelest weapon of all. Some imperial priests tried to rally faith against him. I remember one sermon in particular, a confessor named Malchier, screaming himself hoarse in the ruins of St. Drusus Chapel. His voice shook as he proclaimed, "He is a test. The Emperor has sent us this false angel to harden our faith. Stand strong, children of Terra, and you will endure." We believed him for a heartbeat. We clutched our rosaries, muttered litanies, tried to feel the Emperor's warmth. And then the false angel walked into the chapel. He didn't speak, didn't laugh. He just looked at the confessor. Then, with a single breath, he exhaled. The air ignited, pews overturned, and Malchier was torn apart mid-sermon. His faith scattered into ashes that stung our eyes. That was the day belief began to fracture. Some still clung to the Emperor. Others turned silent, hollow. A few began to wonder if maybe the stranger was right, and maybe the galaxy already belonged to him. And though he said little, though he offered no speeches or doctrine, whispers spread of his true intent. Not conquest, not worship, just ownership. A hunger not for faith, but for dominion. The first history of him was not written in parchment or record. It was carved into us, into the fear in our stomachs, the emptiness in our throats, the ash in our lungs. And deep down, even then, we knew this was no beginning. It was the ending of all we had known. But even endings have routines. Life under his shadow was not life. It was waiting, waiting for the next sound of the sky breaking, waiting for the next street to be torn apart, waiting for the next moment when red eyes would drift over you, and in that instant you would wonder if you were still allowed to exist. Every day began with silence, not peace silence. We woke without roosters or sirens, only the creak of broken habs and the shuffle of boots on ash. People whispered their morning prayers, but softer than before. It wasn't the Emperor they feared angering now. It was him. We scavenged food from ruins, fought over stale ration bars and spoiled Grok's meat. Water was a treasure greater than gold. Children were sent with dented cans to collect rain, though half the time it stank of metal and ash. We drank anyway, because thirst doesn't listen to reason. Work was no longer work. It was ritual. We were ordered by trembling overseers, by frightened commissars, to rebuild walls, clear streets, bury the dead. But we knew why. Not because it mattered to the Imperium, not because order could be restored, but because if the stranger passed through and saw disorder, destruction, weakness, he punished us. Punishment wasn't always death. That would have been kinder. Sometimes he would take a single person and lift them into the air, holding them there like a doll, as the crowd watched. Minutes turned to hours. Their screams broke into whimpers. Their eyes bulged, until finally he released them. Not alive, not dead, but something in between. We buried those husks quickly, before their sightless eyes infected our dreams. And yet, the worst part was his indifference. He never raised his voice, never lectured, never demanded worship or offerings. His silence was heavier than any speech. It meant that everything we did, everything we believed, everything we were meant nothing. The Imperium tried to keep its grip. Commissars barked orders. Priests called for penance. Arbites stalked the alleys. but they were just men, and men bleed. We watched officers argue over whether to fight or flee, and then watched them burn under his gaze. So our daily routine shifted. Survival was no longer about pleasing the emperor. It was about avoiding his notice. Do not run. Running draws his eyes. Do not shout. Noise carries. Do not hope. Hope makes you careless. We became shadows of ourselves. Families huddled together in basements, mouths wrapped in cloth to muffle their breath. Children were taught not to cry, not because their parents were cruel, but because sound was death. At night, we shared stories, whispers of those who had survived an encounter with him, or of towns that had gone unnoticed. A man claimed he lived because he never looked directly into the red glow of his eyes. Another swore the stranger spared children who hid beneath holy icons. These were lies, of course, but we clung to them the way drowning men cling to driftwood. And sometimes, a dark humor crept in. A bitter joke muttered in the dark. At least chaos wants our souls. He doesn't even want that. Laughter turned to sobs. But for a fleeting heartbeat, it made the silence less heavy. I remember one morning clearly. The sun, what was left of it, was bleeding through the clouds, casting a rust-colored haze over the ruins. I was walking with others, carrying rubble to a ditch. My stomach gnawed at itself, hollow from days without food. A boy stumbled beside me, no older than 10, dragging a stone twice his size. He fell. The rock cracked. We froze. And then we saw him, floating above us, cape trailing, eyes burning like coals. No words, no judgment. He simply looked at the boy. We held our breath. The boy trembled, whispered a prayer. And then, for reasons we never knew, the stranger turned and vanished into the clouds. That day, no one spoke. Not relief, not gratitude, just silence. Because survival is not mercy. It is postponement. That was our life. Hunger gnawing, fear choking, work that meant nothing. Rituals performed not for faith but for the chance, just the chance, of being ignored. And still, beneath the silence, we knew something darker was building. Something inevitable. Because daily life under a god is never stable. It always breaks. And soon, his machinery of power would show us how. Power does not always announce itself with trumpets or banners. Sometimes it arrives in silence, and the silence itself becomes the law. He never crowned himself, never sat upon a throne, never declared decrees, never scrawled his mark upon parchment. Yet every day, his will shaped the world more brutally than any governor or warlord. The Imperium had always thrived on cruelty. Ration cards, labor quotas, the lash of commissars, and the sermons of priests. We were used to it. We knew the rules. Obey, work, bleed, and die when ordered. But under him, the rules were different. Simpler, terrifyingly simple. Do nothing that displeases him. The problem was no one knew what that meant. So the commissars invented their own logic. They screamed that discipline would shield us, that order, silence, and unflinching work would keep his gaze elsewhere. They executed men for coughing too loud, flogged women for letting their hands rest too long, burned children's toys as distractions. But no punishment ever guaranteed safety. I saw a commissar once, a hard man named Drevar, with eyes like steel and a tongue of fire. He had executed dozens in the name of discipline, and his men obeyed him out of fear. One day, the stranger appeared during roll call. Drevar saluted, barked his litanies, tried to stand proud. The stranger looked at him, just looked, and in that silence, Drevar collapsed, clutching his chest, blood pouring from his mouth. No weapon fired, no blow struck. He simply died. The men broke ranks instantly, and we learned the truth. The commissars were as powerless as the rest of us. The priests were no better. They filled the air with sermons, insisting the stranger was a test sent by the emperor. Others declared him the arch-heretic, proof of the galaxy's sin. Their words shifted daily, twisting like worms in rot. But the stranger never acknowledged them. He let them preach. Sometimes he killed them. Sometimes he ignored them. The randomness was worse than any law. Faith became a gamble and we were always the stake. So religion, too, adapted. Prayers grew quieter, muttered less for salvation than for camouflage. Altars were stripped bare, replaced by empty plinths. Not because we lost faith, but because we feared he might see an image of the emperor as a challenge. We began to worship absence. The absence of his gaze. The absence of his shadow. The absence of his wrath. Even the Arbites and the guard changed. Their weapons meant nothing, their tanks were toys before him. So they shifted from soldiers to watchers. They turned inward, controlling us more brutally than ever. "Keep the peace," they said. But peace meant silence, and silence meant survival. Neighbors became spies. Families turned on each other. A single whisper that someone had spoken ill of the stranger could mean your entire hab block burned that night. The Arbites did not need evidence. They only needed the excuse, and we obeyed, because under his presence, betrayal was safer than loyalty. What made it worse was the irony. The Imperium had always demanded blood, obedience, fear. But now, the same machine of oppression that had enslaved us for millennia twisted itself further. Not in the Emperor's name, but in the name of nothing. No creed, no banner, no promise. Just a silent figure in a red cape, drifting above us like a storm cloud that never broke. We used to joke bitterly, when no ears were listening. At least chaos wants to own your soul. He doesn't even care for that. And so our lives shrank smaller and smaller. We were ants beneath his boot, and worse, we knew he didn't even care enough to step down hard. But one day, the silence broke. Not with words, but with events. Because horror in the Imperium is never static. It escalates, always escalates, and what came next was worse. The galaxy does not remain quiet for long, not even under his shadow. The first true horror came with the warp storm. It rolled in without warning, a violet wound opening in the night sky, bleeding corruption across the land. The air turned thick and sour, prayers curdled on tongues, and the dreams of every living soul erupted into screams. We thought, for once, that our tormentor would finally meet his match. The demons came, crawling, shrieking, their bodies half shadow, half flesh, their mouths full of promises and curses. The ground split with claws of living fire, and from the fissures spilled nightmares given form. We cowered as we always had. We waited for death as we always did. But what happened next was worse than salvation, worse than damnation. He appeared in the sky, the red cape snapping like a banner of blood. No fear, no hesitation. He welcomed them. The demons lunged, their claws screeching against his flesh. He didn't flinch. With one hand, he tore a creature of Slaanish apart as if it were wet parchment, scattering its essence back into the warp. Another beast of corn bellowed, its axe dripping molten blood. He seized it mid-swing, crushed the weapon into powder, and then punched through its chest so hard the shockwave flattened a cathedral. They kept coming. He kept killing. And then we saw it, something we never imagined. The demons feared him. Warp things that had plagued mankind for 10,000 years, that had danced in fire and slaughtered saints, now hesitated. They recoiled. Their screeches wavered into confusion. We should have cheered. Instead, we trembled, because in that moment it became clear. If even the gods' nightmares feared him, what chance did we ever have? It did not end there. The warp storm only worsened. Entire regiments were swallowed. Hab blocks twisted into living flesh. Rivers boiled, and the sky tore like paper. He walked through it, unbothered. The storm parted where he moved, reality bending as if unwilling to touch him. We watched from ruins as he fought not only demons, but the storm itself, punching apart rifts, tearing fissures closed with his bare hands, burning away corruption with his gaze. It was not heroism. It was ownership. The galaxy itself seemed to bend beneath his will. And when the storm finally ebbed, when the last demon howled and was dragged back into the abyss, he stood untouched, unmarked. The rest of us were not so fortunate. Our cities were gone, our families scattered, our sanity cracked, and when we turned to him, desperate for a word, a sign, anything, he looked at us, just looked, and then he left. But horror does not pause. It escalates. The next tragedy came from within. A rebellion. Desperate men who believed, perhaps rightly, that if he bled, it could end. They had gathered weapons, whispered plans, and one night they struck. Snipers, explosives, relic blades stolen from shrines. I remember the sound, the crack of lost fire, the thunder of detonations. The brief, flickering hope that maybe, just maybe, we were not ants after all. And then silence. He emerged from the smoke, cape torn but body unbroken, his face carved from stone. In his hand, he carried one of the rebels. Not alive, not dead, just broken, twitching. He dropped the body at our feet. No words. That silence was worse than any speech. The rebellion ended before it began. Each event that followed was sharper, crueler. Arbites' raids against their own kind. Families dragged into streets for rumors of defiance. Children disappearing into the sky, never returned. And still he floated above, unyielding, unfeeling. Not a man, not a god, something worse. Every horror in the galaxy builds upon the last. We thought chaos was the pinnacle of fear, but we learned quickly, there is no pinnacle, only escalation, and we had not yet reached the summit, because even his weapons began to change. The city lay restless, its smog-choked air humming with the echoes of 1,000 secrets. Deadpool had spent the night perched on a rusted spire, his mask tilted upward, as if mocking the Emperor's stars. He hummed tunelessly, twirling one of his katanas between his fingers. Beneath the surface jokes, though, something had shifted. For the first time since arriving in this nightmare galaxy, Deadpool wasn't sure he was the loudest ghost in the room. That was when the shadow came. It didn't announce itself with bolter fire or demonic shrieks. Only a weight, a sensation that made the air fold in on itself. Even Deadpool, who'd faced eldritch horrors and forgotten half of them, felt the wrongness crawl over his skin. "Okay," he muttered. "That's either my burrito from last night coming back for vengeance, or something way, way worse." The darkness stretched and reformed, revealing a figure draped in robes like liquid obsidian. Its mask, featureless except for 2 pinpricks of shifting light, watched Deadpool with the patience of a predator. "The Collector," Deadpool whispered, his joking tone cracking for once. The figure didn't speak in words, but in vibrations that pressed against Deadpool's skull. "You are not of this galaxy. You do not belong. Yet you bleed across its fabric, leaving stains even the warp notices." Deadpool laughed nervously, fingers tightening on his blades. "Yeah, well, I've been told I stain a lot of carpets. Sorry, buddy. No refunds." The Collector extended a hand, palm opening to reveal not flesh but a shifting hole, a void that pulled at the edges of reality. Inside it, Deadpool glimpsed fractured versions of himself. Dozens, hundreds, each trapped in eternal stillness. Variants caught mid-joke, mid-scream, mid-dying. Deadpool's mind reeled. For once, he didn't crack wise. His hands shook. The Collector's message pulsed again. "One of you is enough. Too many and the fabric tears. You are an anomaly. I will correct this." For the first time since arriving in the grimdark, Deadpool felt small. Just a man, flesh and madness, caught in a machine that wasn't built for him. His mask suddenly felt tighter, suffocating. And yet, even as fear clawed at him, the merc with a mouth managed a whisper of defiance. "You think you can erase me? Pal, I've been erased more times than I can count. But I always come back. Always." The Collector tilted its head, as if considering. Then the shadows surged forward, swallowing the spire, the city, and Deadpool himself. He fell down, down into a labyrinth of mirrors that reflected not the world, but only him. Each pane showed another possibility. Deadpool as an Inquisitor, Deadpool as a Space Marine, Deadpool corrupted into a champion of Nurgle. Infinite versions of his chaos, infinite reminders of the truth. He didn't belong. Yet here he was. Deadpool pressed a gloved hand against the glass. His reflection grinned back, whispering, "What if this time you don't come back?" And for the first time since arriving in Warhammer 40K, Deadpool didn't know the punchline. The fall ended not with a crash, but with silence. Deadpool stood on a floor that wasn't solid, somewhere between glass, water, and the skin of a drum. Every step rippled outward in waves, echoing through the endless mirror maze that surrounded him. Each mirror held him. Some versions were grotesque parodies, mutated Deadpools with tentacles writhing under power armor. Others were disciplined, almost noble. A Deadpool in golden custode's plate, standing tall without a single joke on his lips. Some wore the colors of chaos gods. One was even nailed to a cross, laughing through the blood. Okay, either I'm at Comic-Con's worst bathroom mirror, or this is one of those face your inner self therapy sessions. And let me tell ya, Doc, my insurance does not cover this. The collector's voice vibrated in the marrow of his bones. Each possibility bleeds. Each ripple corrupts. The galaxy cannot contain them all. Deadpool tilted his head at a mirror showing him as a towering space marine with chainswords for arms. Well, yeah, but have you considered this is awesome? Look at me, Mom. No hands, just carnage. The laughter cracked, though, when he passed another reflection. One where he wasn't moving at all. A Deadpool slumped against a wall, his mask torn, his body rotting. No healing, no jokes, just stillness. Deadpool froze. That wasn't right. He pressed a hand to the glass, and the reflection didn't mimic him. Instead, it looked up with dead eyes and croaked, "You end here." The collector's void hand tore through the mirrors, shattering entire rows. Fragments of reality scattered like shards of frozen light, each one a Deadpool trapped mid-scream. The void was pulling, dragging them inward. Deadpool panicked. He ran, bouncing between fractured versions of himself, dodging shards that tried to stick to him like leeches. His boots slapped on the shifting surface. His lungs burned. Nope, 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 nope. I'm not going out like this. If I die in Warhammer, I want it to be in the middle of a heroic last stand. Not, he tripped. The shard he fell into wasn't a reflection. It was a world. He crashed through the glass like water and tumbled into mud. Rain pouring down on a battlefield of corpses. Lost gun fire cracked in the distance, and an Imperial guardsman lay dying nearby. Deadpool stumbled to his knees, looking around in horror. The battlefield stretched infinitely, and scattered through it were himself. Dozens, hundreds, maybe thousands of Deadpools lying dead in the muck. Some decapitated, some half-melted, some burned black. For once, Deadpool's jokes dried up. His chest rose and fell in shallow, ragged breaths. "Oh, God." The collector's voice rumbled through the thunder. "This is inevitability. An anomaly cannot persist forever. You are Ent." The storm raged harder, lightning splitting the black sky above the corpse field. Deadpool staggered to his feet, katana trembling in his grip. The battlefield was endless, but it was no longer silent. One by one, the fallen Deadpools twitched. Their heads snapped toward him with sickening cracks. Their bodies, half-burned, half-rotten, bullet-ridden, began to rise. Masks torn, limbs missing, weapons fused into flesh. Each corpse spoke in the same voice, his voice overlapping in a chorus of madness. "You are not the original. You are not meant to be. You are the mistake." Deadpool tried to laugh, but it came out like a dry cough. "Wow, you guys are really committed to the cosplay. Did I miss the zombie Deadpool fan club sign-up sheet?" The nearest corpse charged, dragging a lost gun fused into its spine. Deadpool slashed it clean in half. But when the pieces hit the mud, they crawled back together, twitching like worms. Another Deadpool, missing both arms, headbutted him. Another lunged with a bayonet sticking from its chest like a natural blade. They came from all directions, snarling, screeching, moaning. Deadpool fought. Steel rang, flesh split, gunshots cracked. The mud turned into red soup beneath his boots. But there were always more. Every time he cut one down, two more clawed their way out of the muck. Okay. Lesson learned. Never binge Army of Darkness before bedtime. One corpse spoke with more clarity, its jaw hanging loose by strips of sinew. "You think you're immortal, but here you end. The warp does not forgive anomalies. Deadpool shoved his katana through its throat, growling. Yeah? Well, I don't forgive boring speeches. But his arms were getting heavy. His healing couldn't keep up. Every bite, every stab, every claw shredded him faster than his cells could repair. His vision blurred red. He staggered, slipping in the blood-soaked mud. The collector's voice thundered, shaking the ground. You will drown in yourself. Your paradox collapses. You are the cancer of realities. Deadpool fell to his knees, corpses swarming over him, clawing, gnawing. Their hands dragged him downward into the muck. He screamed, shoving his katana upward into the storm. For a moment, the blade cut not flesh, but reality. The sky tore open with a crack like thunder, revealing shards of light and shadow. And Deadpool laughed through the blood in his throat. If I'm going down, I'm taking the whole multiverse therapy session with me. The battlefield shattered. The corpses were sucked back into the void. Deadpool plummeted again, tumbling through broken glass and bleeding reflections. When he hit the ground this time, he wasn't in mud. He was on cold steel. The hum of machinery vibrated beneath him. The smell of oil and incense filled his nose. He was on a Mechanicus Forge world, and standing before him, servo arms twitching, red robes dragging, was a tech priest whose voice wheezed like rusted gears. Flesh thing? Anomaly? What are you? Deadpool coughed, wiped blood from his mask, and raised a hand weakly. Name's Deadpool. And buddy, you have no idea how bad of a day I'm having. The forge world was alive with noise. Endless clanging hammers, roaring furnaces, the shriek of servitors with their voices replaced by vox screeches. Red smog choked the air, thick with iron and incense, stinking of burned oil and sanctified blood. Deadpool dragged himself upright, his boots slipping on the grease-slick floor. The tech priest loomed over him, a mass of tubes and bronze plates. Servo arms tipped with scalpels and drills twitched hungrily in the haze. Dozens of glass lenses clicked and refocused as the priest studied him. Flesh thing, anomaly, unholy persistence of tissue. Your cells disobey the machine god's laws. Deadpool coughed, pulled a jagged piece of mirror shard from his arm, and waved it like a party favor. Yeah, well, my HMO said the same thing. You should see what happens when I try to donate blood. The tech priest did not laugh. Instead, it jabbed a needle the size of a harpoon into his chest. Deadpool yelped. The machine's voice hissed with static-laced awe. No decay, no entropy. Even now, wounds knit. Impossible. More robed figures emerged from the shadows, their bodies half machine, half human. Their hands nothing but drills and claws. Servitors dragged iron chains and clamps. A steel altar, dripping with old blood, rose from the floor with a grinding shriek. Deadpool's eyes widened beneath his mask. Oh no, nope, I know this setup. I've seen enough Warhammer memes to know I'm about to be upgraded. The tech priests began chanting in Benharic, the machine code language of worship. 010011. Anomaly dissect, sanctify flesh, offer to the Omnisia, purge paradox. Deadpool was shackled to the altar, his limbs pinned by iron clamps. The first servo-drill word, pressing against his mask. He squirmed. Hey, I'm not even Catholic. This doesn't count as confession. Ow, ow, ow. Stop poking me. The drill plunged into his skull. Sparks flew. Deadpool screamed, and then laughed, because the hole knitted shut instantly. The tech priests froze. The drill withdrew, dripping with his blood. The wound healed before their lenses. One whispered in Benharic static. He repairs faster than the machine itself. Another leaned close, voice trembling with metallic awe. Not flesh, not machine. Heresy incarnate. Deadpool flexed, snapping the clamps as his body stitched together from dozens of punctures. He stumbled off the altar, katana drawn, staggering like a drunk but grinning through blood. Guess what, Tin Men? You just found out the hard way. My warranty can't be voided. The forge chamber erupted. Sirens screamed. Servitors rushed him with saw blades for arms. Tech priests shrieked prayers, unleashing arcs of lightning and gouts of sacred fire. Deadpool danced through them, blades flashing, bullets tearing through metal and flesh alike. But even as he killed, more came. The endless machine flesh tide closed in. Above, the collector's voice rippled through the smog. No matter where you land, anomaly, you spread contagion, and they will not let you live. Deadpool growled, covered in machine oil and his own blood. Story of my freaking life. Behind him, the forge's cathedral doors groaned open. A new figure entered. A Muggos Dominus, massive and monstrous. Its body bristling with plasma weaponry and mechadendrites like a writhing forest of steel serpents. Its vox boom rattled the walls. Seize the anomaly. Offer his paradox to the machine god. Deadpool turned, cracked his neck, and muttered under his breath, "Oh great, the final boss of IKEA." And then the chamber burned red as the Muggos raised its weapons. The Forge Cathedral was a cavern of steel ribs and burning braziers, its ceiling lost in shadow, its walls layered with statues of the machine god, half human, half gear, all cold and unfeeling. The air stank of ozone and melted copper. Hymns of static poured from vox altars, each syllable glitching like broken code. Deadpool stood in the middle of it all, katana dripping with blood and oil, his mask torn open at the jaw. He was trembling, but not from fear, from the adrenaline of too many near-deaths piling on each other like bad hangovers. The Muggos Dominus descended the steps with the weight of a titan. Its mechadendrites writhed, tipped with saws, plasma cutters, and syringes filled with glowing toxins. Dozens of glowing red lenses tracked Deadpool, each one focusing on a different part of his body. Anomaly, cancer, virus of flesh, you do not belong. You will be unmade. Deadpool raised his hand like a student in class. Quick question. Does this count as an intervention? Because I feel like I should have brought snacks. The Muggos answered with violence. A plasma blast screamed across the cathedral, searing the air. Deadpool dove, rolling across the slick floor, the heat peeling layers off his suit. The blast left a crater where he'd been standing, molten steel dripping like wax. Servo arms lunged at him, snapping like steel vipers. Deadpool slashed two clean off, only for three more to snake around his waist and hurl him into a pillar. His bones shattered on impact. He coughed blood, wheezing, already knitting back together. Ow. Okay, that's definitely a cracked spleen. Pretty sure it was the good one too. The Muggos advanced, chanting Benharic prayers that echoed with machine distortion. Sparks rained down as servitors filled the aisles, their vox scream liturgies drowning out Deadpool's quips. Deadpool fought like a man drowning in enemies. His swords flashed, cutting through flesh and steel alike, spraying sparks, smoke, blood. He emptied pistols point-blank into servo skulls, kicked a servitor's head clean off, then immediately got skewered through the chest by a mechadendrite spike. Pinned, choking, he looked up at the Muggos looming over him, vox booming. "Your heresy ends here." Deadpool coughed blood, then grinned. "Yeah? Funny thing about heresy, it's contagious." He shoved a grenade into the Muggos' chest cavity. The explosion tore half its torso open in a blast of fire and shrapnel. Deadpool was hurled back across the cathedral, bouncing off an altar, his body shredded but already restitching. The Muggos staggered, smoking, sparks vomiting from its wounds. Yet it did not fall. Instead, it extended both massive arms, summoning an orb of crackling lightning between its claws. The entire cathedral trembled, statues crumbling, stained glass shattering in a rain of shards. Deadpool groaned, forcing himself to his feet, katanas dragging behind him. "Okay, fine. Final boss mode it is. Let's see if you can handle the one thing scarier than tech heresy." He twirled both blades, masks slashed open in a bloody grin. "Me on a Monday morning." The orb exploded outward in a wave of machine lightning. Deadpool charged straight into it, screaming, his flesh burning away and regrowing in the same instant, his laughter echoing through the cathedral like something that wasn't entirely human anymore. The Forge Cathedral was no longer a place of worship. It was a slaughterhouse, a nightmare circus lit by burning braziers and arcs of lightning that danced like angry gods. The Muggos Dominus unleashed the machine storm, tendrils of pure plasma scything through statues, servitors, and sanctified iron alike. Deadpool staggered forward into the storm, flesh peeling away in strips, bones exposed, organs sizzling. And yet, every step he regrew, every nerve screamed back to life. You know what this feels like? Every Taco Tuesday I've ever had. Multiplied by 10, he leapt, katanas raised. A mechadendrite speared him through the abdomen midair, halting his flight. Another rammed through his shoulder, pinning him like a grotesque butterfly in a collector's case. The Muggos boomed, Vox trembling with static fury. Your resilience is not proof of divinity. It is abomination. You are a virus. Deadpool spat blood across the Muggos' lenses. Correction. I'm a fun virus. The kind that downloads free ringtones to your cogitator. He twisted, using his own impaled torso as leverage, and hacked both katanas into the Muggos' central chest plate. Sparks erupted. Fluid gushed like black ichor. The Muggos howled in machine speech as its internal organs, half human, half engine, spilled out in steaming chunks. Deadpool ripped himself free of the spikes, half his torso dangling loose, then jammed a grenade into the wound he'd carved. Knock, knock. The explosion tore through the Muggos, sending its upper body crashing into the cathedral pillars. Servitors shrieked and fell silent, their control signals severed. For a moment, there was silence except for the crackle of burning machinery. Deadpool collapsed to his knees, coughing, organs writhing back into place. He laughed weakly, voice cracked. Ha! Beat the boss. Roll credits. Cue Stan Lee cameo. But then the collector's voice filled the cathedral like a collapsing star. No, this is not your victory. This is your cage. The air tore open. Reality cracked. The shattered mirrors of Deadpool's labyrinth returned, their shards bleeding into the cathedral like falling meteors. Each shard contained another Deadpool. Fighting, screaming, dying, laughing. The reflections spilled outward, crawling free like ghosts escaping a prison. Dozens of Deadpools stood around him now, some twisted and mutated, others armored like space marines, others little more than shadows with his voice. One stepped forward, its mask burned half away, one eye glowing with warp fire. You can't fight it. You are us. We're all you. And we're all doomed. Deadpool's grip on his katanas faltered. For the first time, he looked scared. No, this is just another cutscene. Just another bad dream. I don't... The collector's voice thundered, final and absolute. You cannot kill the joke, anomaly. But you cannot escape it either. You will drown in yourself, forever. The cathedral fell away. Deadpool was dragged upward into the storm of mirrors, screaming as endless versions of himself closed in, tearing, clawing, laughing. And then, silence. There was no ground, no sky, no walls, just a stage. A spotlight burned down on Deadpool, its glow sour and artificial, while the rest of the void stretched into nothingness. Around him, an audience sat in endless rows, every seat filled with Deadpools. Some wore masks, some were faceless, some were skeletons in red suits, others twisted into monstrous parodies. They clapped, booed, laughed, and hissed all at once, their voices overlapping into a roar that made the air itself tremble. Deadpool stood center stage, his swords gone, his guns missing. Only the mask remained. Oh no. Don't tell me I'm in a talent show. From the darkness, a curtain drew back. A ringmaster stepped forward. His coat was stitched from the skins of fallen enemies, his mask black and cracked, his eyes glowing red like dying coals. He was Deadpool too, only taller, crueler, his voice smooth and venomous. The audience howled with glee as the ringmaster raised his hands. Ladies and gentlemen, freaks and failures, welcome to tonight's performance. The greatest joke in the multiverse. The anomaly who refuses to die. The audience screamed back in unison, Deadpool! 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 Deadpool trembled, trying to laugh it off. Cute setup. Where's the part where you pull a rabbit out of my butt? The ringmaster grinned, teeth like knives. No tricks tonight. Only truth. With a snap of his fingers, the spotlight split into dozens more. Each one illuminated a different scene on the stage. Deadpool dying in countless ways. Shot, burned, torn apart, left to rot. Every possible failure on display over and over again. Deadpool fell to his knees, clutching his head. No, I always bounce back. That's the rule. That's the bit. That's the joke. The ringmaster knelt beside him, voice low and cruel. And what if the joke isn't funny anymore? The audience erupted in hysterical laughter, slapping their knees, doubling over. Their mirth shook the void like artillery. Deadpool's mask was wet beneath his hands. Tears, blood, or both. For the first time, his healing felt slow. His body ached, his spirit frayed. The ringmaster rose, pointing a gloved hand at him like a judge. You are not a hero, not a villain, not a savior. You are nothing but noise. The galaxy will forget you. But in here, in the warp, you will perform forever. Chains erupted from the void, wrapping Deadpool's arms and legs, dragging him upright like a marionette. The ringmaster tugged invisible strings, and Deadpool's body danced clumsily across the stage to the roar of the audience. Deadpool screamed, not in pain but in something worse. Shame. The spotlight dimmed until only two figures stood on the endless stage. Deadpool, shackled in chains of black light, and the ringmaster, his doppelganger made flesh, every cruel instinct and ugly truth given form. The audience of infinite Deadpools hushed. Their silence was worse than the laughter. It pressed down like a tombstone. The ringmaster paced in slow circles, his voice calm, surgical. You've always hidden behind jokes, behind chaos. But tell me, what are you when the laughter stops? What are you when nobody's watching? Deadpool's mask sagged. His mouth was dry. He tried to quip, but the words died in his throat. For once, he had nothing. The ringmaster seized his chin, forcing him to look into those glowing red eyes. You are fear. You are loneliness. You are a disease that pretends to be a man. The chains tightened, biting into Deadpool's flesh, drawing blood that sizzled in the void. He screamed, but the sound was thin, weak. The audience leaned forward, hungry. Deadpool spat, his voice hoarse but defiant. Yeah? Well, if I'm the disease, then guess what, Doc? He twisted, muscles tearing against the chains. His healing roared back, fury overriding despair. I'm terminal. With a howl, he ripped one arm free, skin shredding, bone snapping. He drove his fist into the ringmaster's chest. The doppelganger staggered, laughing even as blood spilled. The audience gasped. Then, like a hive, they began to chant, "Fight! Fight! Fight! Fight!" The stage cracked. The void itself shook. Mirrors shattered, spraying shards of other realities across the arena. Deadpool and the ringmaster clashed in a storm of blades, fists, and screams. Every strike mirrored 1,000 times by their watching selves. Deadpool was torn open again and again, but so was the ringmaster. They healed, they bled, they laughed, they roared. It was grotesque, endless, a battle of jokes and rage and madness. Finally, Deadpool drove both katanas through the ringmaster's throat, pinning him to the stage. Blood sprayed in arcs of black light. The ringmaster's voice gurgled, but the smile never left his lips. Kill me, and another takes my place. You can't win, Wade. You can't kill yourself." Deadpool leaned close, mask half torn, teeth bared in something between a grin and a sob. "Then I'll just keep killing me, until there's nothing left." He ripped the blades upward. The ringmaster's head split apart, dissolving into smoke. The audience shrieked in fury, some vanishing into dust, others clawing at their own masks in rage. The stage collapsed. The chains broke. Deadpool fell once more, tumbling into the void of mirrors, alone, yet freer than before. But as he plummeted, the collector's voice whispered like a funeral dirge, "You won nothing. You will never escape. You are infinite. You are your own prison. Deadpool laughed weakly through blood and broken ribs. Yeah. But at least I stole the spotlight, and the void swallowed him whole. The galaxy was no longer a place of stars. It was a place of ash. Entire sectors burned in synchronized silence, as if the void itself was swallowing the screams of billions. The Emperor, the master of mankind, who once spoke in visions, dreams, and the whisper of faith, had grown silent. Priests wept in cathedrals. Astropaths clawed their own eyes. Even the custodians, golden giants once unshaken, muttered doubts behind closed doors. For there was a new center of gravity in the galaxy. Not Terra, not the throne, but him, the alien god in crimson and blue, draped not in cloth but in scorched banners of broken worlds. Superman. He had carved a new empire of steel and silence. Not with words, not with ideology, but with fear so total it did not need translation. On a dozen shrine worlds, pilgrims gathered before statues of the Emperor, and then watched as shadows of the false god passed overhead, blotting out the sun, reminding them who now watched closer than their god ever had. And slowly worship began to drift. The failed weapons of man, the high lords of Terra ordered weapons older than memory unleashed. The phalanx, ancient bastion of the imperial fists, was dragged into position to fire upon him. Its guns, meant to annihilate fleets, screamed fire across the void. He did not even dodge. The beams struck his chest, carving storms across his cape, but he floated forward through the inferno, a red glow bleeding from his eyes, brighter than the phalanx's cannons. And when he reached it, he placed a single hand upon the fortress ship. Then he pushed. It drifted, slow at first, then faster, as though the very void rejected its presence. The crew screamed prayers, scrambling to stabilize engines, but the bastion was no longer theirs. It was his toy, and in silent horror, the defenders of Terra watched as their proud fortress was hurled into the gravity of a dead star, vanishing in light. Not a word spoken, not a boast uttered, only action. Chaos laughs and weeps in the eye of terror. The dark gods feasted upon the dread. Their shrines grew fat with sacrifice. Their demons danced in fresh blood. And yet, there was unease. Khorne's warriors found no honor in him. He killed too swiftly, too coldly. Sensuous schemes slipped like sand in his grasp. He was not a pawn, but a void. Slaanesh tasted no ecstasy in his slaughter, only silence. And Nurgle, old grandfather, shuddered in his garden. For this one brought no rot, no cycle, no rebirth. Only ending. The Primarchs of Chaos debated, raged, cursed one another. Abaddon himself stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit and asked the question none wished to. Can the warp consume a god who does not feed it? And for once, the gods themselves gave no answer. The Emperor's silence on Terra, the Astronomicon flickered. Not extinguished, not yet, but dimmer, like a candle robbed of oxygen. The Psychers feeding it bled from their eyes, their screams echoing through the palace halls. Why does he not speak? Whispered Ecclesiarch Theodosius as he knelt before the throne. Why, indeed. Some said the Emperor could not speak, that his will was being smothered by the weight of the intruder. Others whispered the darker truth, that perhaps even the Emperor knew this was not a battle to win, that the galaxy, in its arrogance, had summoned a judge it did not deserve. The screaming galaxy, by the end of that century, 3,000 star systems lay in ruin. Hive worlds were gutted like carcasses, their towers folded into slag. Forge worlds wailed as their machine spirits went cold, ignored by a god who had no need of them. And the galaxy learned to scream differently, not in rebellion, not in prayer, but in silence, because they knew he was listening. Fire cliffhanger for Part 17. The Imperium turns to the unthinkable, forging an alliance with those they once damned to confront the invincible god. Can even the hated Eldar or Necrons offer hope, or will they, too, fall before the Man of Steel's judgment?